Okie dokie. Wow. Okay, Mike did not like that. Anyway, the stream history for me, at least specific to Crossout, has been rather lacking lately. In fact, I don't even think I've sorted my recent videos. Let's see. Yeah. So I have the last one, the update analysis, which is 2.23, and then I don't have anything else Crossout related. Since then I have a couple other games, World War Z, Rainbow Six Extraction, and then I have a little bit of Warframe, including a new update yesterday. But haven't posted any Crossout since, so I do technically kind of have sort of a backlog. Wow, internet does not like that. Well, that's unfortunate. Being lied to with the excellent stream quality, but we'll send it anyway, I think. Let's see, can I make this less trash? Well, not at the moment, apparently, but that's fine, because we're just gonna send it as is anyway. So this one will be going over the builds I had, what's changed since, and what I maybe plan on changing if there's anything that's immediately coming to mind for them. But you'll note that we're on update, I think 25 now, U25, and I think the highest I have is 2.4, and very many of them are before then. So we'll so we'll have a bunch to update after, especially with the new battle pass items and changes, but you know, say la vie, that's same with any update. So I don't really believe the sorting system is too terribly good, because these aren't even in any discernible order, but we'll just go by power score, because that should group alike things. So at the very top we're going to have the builds that I was using for the last BFU, which was 16 to 20k bracket, and then we'll go through the other. So to begin with, we have the fusion builds from before. So with the, I think it was Grand Prix update, whatever, the last one, I was able to cut down on some legs, so instead of 12 legs it's 10, which means I was also able to armor some things up. But then I switched from Grizzly to Falcon, and can alternatively use J, because the entire point is having the person on the front soak damage, so having the extra mass is useful for making a super heavy build, but wasn't too particularly good as far as the actual perk or the other bonuses. So I took Grizzly off, and as a result had to chop down on some of the weight for the frames there, but these are essentially redundant frames anyway, so having them be lightweight instead of heavy is kind of a non-issue. On this one, was having some mass issues, even though I was able to cut down another leg, but couldn't really get down low enough to take Grizzly off. Now, I could theoretically turn the expanded ammo packs into the special tier, but that extra space doesn't really actually let me move or flip around any of these things here. So while I could technically save some mass there, and I don't really need the quantity of rockets from running two expanded containers, I also don't really benefit a whole lot from that change. So I've just left it with Grizzly, and again had to swap out some of the frames. This is a super heavy variant of essentially the Wraith build I had made last year. The current iteration of it is my Helicon. So originally it was with the Griffin and it was with the Thyrsus. Now it's currently with the Step Spider and the Helicon while I'm finishing that trial. But looks at enclosing the hovers, specifically with the Bartizan and right military truck and left military truck fenders. So essentially just using APC parts to try and protect them, since there's only a few parts that actually wrap around hovers fairly well. So for the last BFU specifically, I looked at making a heavier double Helicon version, which I made, and then I yoinked one off of Exhibition and adapted it for running a more sniper build. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to have one for sniping, I might as well have essentially a even heavier version of this, which is what I did with the Nova. So that is a 10 hover version of, meant to test drive, but whatever, of that. So I didn't end up finishing this before the BFU ended, and honestly it probably is going to have some performance issues. If for nothing else, then it's super sluggish and tends to overturn whenever it rotates. But I'm keeping around and, you know, can maybe mess around with it in next relevant game mode. So that's what those were. So to that end, I might end up just deleting this one, since it's essentially a slightly babier version of this. Me removing the decor on this gets it back down to 20,000, but the devs have indicated no immediate plans for re-implementing a bracket that high, so it'd just be a question of what's useful in Clan Wars. And like, while I like the idea of this and like putting all the parts together, and it is technically modular, I don't expect we're going to be doing a whole lot of those either, but it is an option. This is essentially unchanged with the last season. I did swap out the hot red for the Oyaboon, but that's pretty much it. I talked about it a little bit before. I stuck with the 8 legs, even though it technically only needs 6 or 7, just to help with the crab aesthetic. And I'm not really a fan of those Dex pieces, so I'll probably replace and rearmor them again with the new 6x3x1s that we get in this battle pass. This is the Atrophizer again, so rebuilt it multiple times. This is the current iteration, which isn't as compact as the prior versions, and it doesn't have a roof to protect the weapons, but it is meant to be primarily counter levy, and it's ended up having quite a bit more power than just the version with Titan wheels. And with the super far forward cabin, tends to last a little bit better when I get close to levies and they can't aim down. Now they did also just buff the Omamori, so in theory that'll make it ever so slightly more useful, but again, we're primarily fighting levies with it, doing the invasion raids, so not too chafed either way. And then I'll probably super annoying how it always goes back to the one in the garage, but I'll yeah, see about updating a bit. Currently I'm essentially at mass because the awkward placement of the flash and wrapping around it, and the 8 Sabbath wheels, even with the Pegasus engine on a medium cabin fused for mass limit, is yeah, a lot of mass. So I would want to try and like up tier parts. I can theoretically fit the 4x3x2 APC hard module on these ends here, but again, without me suddenly getting a bunch of mass from another source or them rebalancing the tonnage. So say I only need 6 wheels instead of 8 or something of that ilk. Not a whole lot more I can do with it without quote unquote downgrading from the cast and APC parts to Firestarter parts, but even then I'm like really close to the part limit, so that isn't going to really stretch it a whole lot further either. This hasn't changed. I did literally rearrange the undercarriage and then add a new paint when I swapped out the hovers for the upgraded versions, but like it's not actually improved in any way. This is the other vehicle that I was using for BFU. I did find more success with this when I was running with a clanmate who was running a tankier build that could take some of the aggro and then have this focus on putting in damage. And I do have some clips of it doing well, and I found it a lot better in solo, because even though the other versions had radar, which I felt was more immediately useful, I was getting out-sniped a lot with the Helicons against, like, Scorps, and it's a hover, which means that it wasn't really durable enough against the closer builds like the Firebug Dogs or the Mastos. So this has quite a bit of mobility, which seemed to fare better, and then it also had more immediately direct damage. So this is running, as you can see, a lot of damage pass-through parts on the back just to keep the mass down and help get the power score up, but they're not the 90% damage pass-through parts, so the ones that actually add quite a bit of durability. The original version of this only had like 1500 health, so it got destroyed pretty quick. But this is what was the final version, where I have the Trombone, Hadron, Avalanche, and that lets me shoot the Avalanche fairly frequently. Not as much as the King, but I found the Trombone as well as the saved energy to be a lot more useful, especially for supporting people. And I'm also a pretty decent shot with this, so me being able, I say as I immediately miss, but other than when I do miss, tend to be a pretty good shot with this, so I was also fine to sort of just stay back and lob shots, and you know, I mean, anytime it's hitting, it's dealing 1,000 damage or so, again, other than when I again missed, so it's not really something where I have to hang back, but it makes it a lot safer for me, obviously, and then I can still shave off hundreds of damage per shot on whatever I'm shooting at. So as long as the team, who pretty much always is going to 1v4 rush, 2v4 rush anyway, I mean, if they can stay alive for even 30 or so seconds, that's normally enough for me to cripple a build or two. And this hasn't been changed. I sold my Reapers because people were offering me too much money for them, and the price hasn't gone back down, so haven't really done any updates for that. It's already pretty tight on energy economy, but in theory getting Harmonizer, or Harmonizers plural, on here would be pretty good, since the biggest negative of the Reapers in my eyes is the spread, and that basically just kills that component, so not an issue. This, as you can see, I have a few parts that have been re-upgraded and a couple missing parts, but still haven't done anything with this. Still don't have another person or two to link to, but it's, you know, still kind of on the back burner. Experimental builds haven't really been updated. This got a slight update with the energy rework being quite a while ago now, and I was just kind of procrastinating. So with the Oyabun, I was able to again swap out the hot red, put the Odin in, add another kilo, and then add quite a bit more armor to it from when it was earlier. But this is like, I've tried it in PvP a couple times, or rather a downscaled version at 9k back when Arena was a thing, and didn't have much success with it. And so it was mostly made for PvE, specifically for plastic frontier defense, before I had Cyclones. And it hasn't really been touched since, but I've kept it because it's a unique enough variance for most of my other builds. I don't really have anything else on like Omnis, or especially of this like diamond weapon formation style. The Dreadnought, this is currently my fuck around one, which has been sitting in the garage, but of course I had to save it to a slot so I could change to other things for the purpose of the stream. But the prior version is super outdated at this point, so I've been looking at updating it, but with the energy changes, it's kind of in an awkward place, because the snowfalls are 9 energy each instead of 10, which means in theory if I upgrade the Odin, I'd have 6, or upgrade from the Thor to the Odin on the build, I'd have 6 energy, and then I could take off the Interceptor, but then after that I'd have to take off a module in order to hit 9 energy for a 3rd snowfall. And I also want to upgrade the flywheel, plus since we're using the Phobos co-driver for extra speed, because this is a go as fast as possible build, we want cloak on here. So the current version I have is kind of trying to play around with all that. So running pungies instead mean we don't really need the fin whale. So we can, like, I mean, we lose like, 3% max cabin speed from it. But as a result, we get a perk that's actually relevant to both the cloak, which, Phobos, and to modules, so even being able to theoretically run drones. Still not super certain on this. Big thing is, like, as a fairly large sort of wedge build for running against perimeter breach, having the snowfalls worked okay there, and I don't know that pungies or cap cans or skinners would, but it is an option in the end. For it being mostly a sort of experimental PvE at worst build, not really a big deal either way. This is the raid build that I had. I swapped out the hovers for the legs because now we have legs. Haven't updated this or that since last time. For our 11k BFU, I don't know, just add it to favorites. I poked around with a couple different variants. So this is the 8 to 10k version that I typically use in ClanCon, so it's normally at 9k specifically for ClanCon, but for BFUs they've been having those shifting brackets, so I couldn't quite scale this up to 11k, at least not with the current configuration I had. So I played around with a couple of other ideas. The first one was from a clanmate, running the Inferno cabin and reinvesting the energy into more like direct utility hardware rather than just boosts for more damage. And then I also yoinked one off of Exhibition and reworked that, but I didn't really get too much performance out of it. I found that this tended to work okay, and then of course if I was against other fast builds, which for that specifically BFU was a lot of other cockpit builds with 2x harvesters, I found that being able to go as fast as them, even if I couldn't shoot backwards or off to the side as easy, worked out. So I don't really have any plans on keeping them, but they were, again, sort of an interesting format I hadn't experimented with before that others had passed on to me. So I do have the other versions for 9k specifically since then, and have been trying to work to see if I can actually get more mileage out of a couple of them, just because, again, my general configuration I've been running for 18 months doesn't scale this high as well, and of course we're going to have another couple of brackets for BFU up this high. Haven't touched this or that, talked about that, haven't touched this, so we go back down to 9k, which is again the regular bracket for ClanCon. So this is a scaled down version of that other build, so it does not have the days anymore because that thing is 6 energy and pretty expensive for power score as a result. And then yeah, I guess none of these have been touched yet either since the last stream. As far as what's on Exhibition, probably just easier if we do this way so it shows all of them. Or I can't even, that's funny. I know I've been able to, like, I'm losing my mind. In the past, I could have sworn I could have literally, like, view personal profile and then see the blue. Oh, never mind. It's just because I'm an idiot was pressing the wrong thing. Teehee. There we go. So that should be all of the categories, so including the Leviathan and the helicopter. So this was for the Halloween contest. Hasn't changed. Still by far the most upvoted as an art build. Funny, but that's the way she works. Hasn't been updated. This was the contest closer than to the new year. Yeah, that hasn't changed. I mean, I do want to change up the factory strider again, but there isn't really any need to do so, since again it's primarily an art build and I don't have any new parts that I think would fit inside the part limit better. that hasn't changed. So the big one that's changed on exhibition is the maglev. So beforehand I had it when the hovers were still 7 pins long, and I was alternating them left and right on the inside, but as a result I had to have the frames snaking across and or the hovers pushed out and like hide that. So this is a complete rebuild of it. With the smaller hovers, I did try and fit more in, but I found that they weren't actually really helping. The primary issue is just having the mass above frame level meant that it was super prone to tipping, so I needed to lower that as much as I could, which is what I accomplished with the Avalanche on the back there. As well as, funny enough, I had to buy an upgraded Apollo because mine is fused 4 mass, specifically to get a little bit more mass on the front bottom. So again, an art build, it's maglev, fit a couple of punji because it kind of works as like a track. And of course, if you do turn with it, it does still have a bad habit of flipping over. But again, primarily art build, it works, and it's drastic improvement over what I had beforehand, so it doesn't bother me any. I'm going to have to rework these, especially with the Geagle perk change. I mean, these are super old to begin with. The energy changes happened, perk changes happened. Carapace didn't even have a perk originally when I made these builds, that's why this one has machine guns instead of just reload weapons. So now with the blueprint changes, me being able to get a few more slots, me being able to move around a few more slots, makes it a little bit easier, so I can actually go back and continue updating these on top of the maglev. So the maglev I just finished like this past week, and then we had this update, and it's like, okay, well now I gotta go adjust all the actual builds I use before I go back and like keep re-uploading these art builds and modernizing them. So bit of a pain, but me how it do. And then yeah, none of these have changed. I did update the hind quite a bit. The original version was essentially just me kind of throwing stuff together to try and get the approximate shape, and then afterwards iterating on that didn't actually really bring it closer to the like actual real life hind shape. So this was essentially a complete rebuild from bottom to top to make it a lot closer to the real life equivalent. And I haven't updated it since, which was I think a month or 2 ago, but it's far closer to what I had. So, far closer than what I had. Did a little research for this, had a full spreadsheet of all the different changes for the hinds, and thus determining what version this would be. So the MI24D specifically, which was the first one that implemented the 2 bubble canopy, which I know technically we don't really have. Likewise, in theory, you'd want another intake at the very top, but again, as a close enough approximation, specifically with the hind cabin we have and within the parts limit, without making a Leviathan slot where Leviathans can't use rotors. Pretty happy with where it is. As we get another few parts that fit, namely the excavator, the new parts, so I can fit this 6x3 panel a little bit easier since I have the Saya here and the 2 Battle Walker cover plates here. Just continuing to improve on it little by little. And then I've spoken before about how in theory I should be using the maple and the impeller, but like for actually making it somewhat combat viable, I'm sticking with the petrol and the cloaking. So then yeah, this was the Yeti and Stillwind combo. I know people do clickbait a lot of times and say, oh, this is broken, this is so OP, this is the new meta. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm literally saying that like from update 22 this was a combo that was broken, it didn't work, because the Yeti's disabling, that's funny, it still says 2 seconds in the description, it's supposed to be 3 seconds now. Anyway, this and this perk, or rather its old perk, which was firing would not decloak for 3 seconds, still cancel each other out. So I was thinking, oh, I could manually decloak while shooting, and then I'd only have that 8-second cooldown being able to cloak again, but that's not the case. So this is another essentially variant of that original Wraith build where I had the Griffin and Thyrsus, but this is a 3 hover one, and this is one that I had specifically at the 10k bracket for the Ravagers event. And yeah, like I said, the combo just literally didn't work, so it didn't end up being very useful. The other submission for Faley's contest, which won the Snowman contest, and then a few other older builds. So here's the old Maglev. So you can see what I was saying about the weaving of the frames and having to like push out a little bit. I also tried the 2 different styles, but like just due to the space limitations, but they didn't work. And mind, this is back when the hovers extended all the way across. That's why there's these little divots at the end. But yeah, that wasn't terribly good. So we can actually remove that now. So big takeaway is just that like most of my exhibition needs to be re-uploaded, especially like my oldest one, although I still need a klaxon, the siren horn, and I haven't gotten it from anything yet, but like I can clean up the wings a little bit now that we have more narrow wings than just 4, with the fuselage slopes as well, potentially the bandage and the plasters. So this one will be, again, pretty straightforward to update, but it's going to be kind of a waiting game until I actually get the siren horn specifically, which is what I'm mostly waiting on for it. So that's a pretty quick overview of all the builds that I have had / worked on since then. And then I'll be doing another stream today looking over the update, specifically the new values, and you know, updating the speed charts, the structural part list with the new parts, etc. As per usual. Normally I do them on or like half the day of the update, but in this case Warframe also got a big update, and then there was the Steam sale for spring, so I've been poking around with a few other things since then, and now I can actually, you know, get around to doing that, which of course will be more math heavy. Likewise, I could theoretically work on updating a lot of these builds. I mean, like I said, the harmonizer is kind of just really good on almost all of them, but I don't always have 1 to 2 energy to spare. But I also have found that doing like a update stream, or like a stream of me updating, tends to be incredibly long. Like this build, for instance, took me 10 or so hours during the BFU event, which is why I couldn't get it done before it even ended. So we'll yeah, we'll have to see. It'll probably just be another